I'm Charlotte and today I will be doing a bookshelf tour. Now I have 3 different bookcases, 2 of which are in my room and one of them is in the study, and I'm just going to be showing you the books on all of them. Now I will be doing an overview for each shelf briefly, and then I will be going through and pulling each book off and showing you the cover and telling you the title and the author. Now I organise my bookshelves by genre, and then within genre I have them alphabetical by author, with the exception of my Stephen King books because there are just so many of them they don't all fit in my horror section, so he has his own section. And then I also split my unread books and my read books. So I try to keep my read books to the 2 bookcases in my room and then my unread books to the one in the other room. However, that is not possible because I have so many unread books, they are spilling everywhere, which you will see. I do apologise for any changes in lighting, nail polish, clothing, voice, whatever, because I have been filming this here and there whenever I can and then smushing it all together into this big video, which by the way is going to be quite long, so I would grab a snack, maybe a drink, settle in. But in this you will also be getting a glimpse at some of the trinkets and bits and bobs I have on my shelves. As you can see behind me I have quite a few Funko Pops and there are a few other odd bits and bobs which you'll get to see, but of course if you have any questions about anything on my shelves please let me know. If you have any comments about my bookshelves again please let me know, or any questions, whatever. So on this first shelf here I have my Stephen King books. Not all of them, but the majority of the ones that I have read, and I also have a Jack Torrance Funko Pop from The Shining and Jon Snow and Ghost. So we have Carrie, The Shining, Firestarter, Cujo, Pet Sematary, It, Misery, Needful Things, Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, Insomnia, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, From a Buick 8, Cell, Just After Sunset, Full Dark No Stars, and Doctor Sleep. This shelf I have the rest of the Stephen King books I've read, and then a small paranormal section, and we start going into the fantasy here. And I also have Ned and Robb Stark Funkos and the Prophecy Orb from the making of Harry Potter Studios. Mr. Mercedes, Revival, Finders Keepers, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, End of Watch, Gwendy's Button Box, Sleeping Beauties, Thinner, Blaze, The Wind Through the Keyhole, Joyland, The Immortal Rules, The Eternity Cure, and The Forever Song, all by Julie Kagawa, Shift by M. Bailey, Dance of Shadows by Yelena Black, Half a King, and Half the World, both by Joe Abercrombie. This shelf is where things start to get a bit more interesting because, as you can see, I have a lot of books stacked in front, and these are my unread Stephen King books. And behind that I have more fantasy books, and then I also have a Stark Direwolf bookend figurine thing and a Sansa Stark Funko Pop. Starting with the unread Stephen King, I have Charlie the Choo Choo, Skeleton Crew, Salem's Lot, The Dead Zone, The Eyes of the Dragon, Christine, Different Seasons, and The Stand. And then in the fantasy books I have Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, Snow White and the Huntsman, the entire Spiderwick Chronicles, The Field Guide, The Seeing Stone, Lucinda's Secret, The Ironwood Tree, and The Wrath of Morgarath, all by Holly Black and Tony DiTillitsi, The Nixie's Song, A Giant Problem, and The Worm King, again all by Holly Black and Tony DiTillitsi, Doll Bones, and The Darkest Part of the Forest, both by Holly Black, The Kingdom of Little Wounds by Susan Cockle, Deep Blue and Rogue Wave, both by Jennifer Donnelly, Angel Fall, World After, and End of Days, all by Susan E., The Dream Snatcher by Abby Elphinstone, The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman, Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, The Gospel of Loki by Joanne M. Harris, The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson, and The Iron King. And on this shelf again we have a very interesting setup because I have the books that I have read behind it, they're just more fantasy books, and then in front we have more unread Stephen King, and then just, you know, other unread books that can't fit anywhere else. Starting with the unread Stephen King, we have The Dark Half, Dance Macabre, Hearts in Atlantis, Bag of Bones, Rose Madder, Dreamcatcher, Lycie's Story, Duma Key, Black House, The Green Mile, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, and Everything's Eventual. And then moving into the other unread books on this shelf, we have The Poetic Edda, translated by Caroline Larrington, The Odyssey by Homer, We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, The Iliad by Homer, An Arc of A Shiver of Snow and Sky by Lisa Ludecki, Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill, Ash by Melinda Lowe, and Girlhood by Kat Clark. And then starting in on the red books, we have The Iron Daughter by Julie Kagawa, R.A. by Jeff Kinsey, The Cubic Quest by Trevor Leck, The Young Elites by Marie Lu, The Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of Wings and Ruin, all by Sarah J. Maas. Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin, Heartless by Marissa Meyer, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, A Monster Cause by Patrick Ness, The Kiss of Deception and The Heart of Betrayal, both by Mary E. Pearson, and His Dark Materials, which is made up of Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass, and Lyra's Oxford, both by Philip Pullman. And then the final shelf on this bookcase, which is incredibly hard to get into shot, has the rest of my fantasy books, and then these are hardbacks which will not fit on the shelf that they need to go on because they're too tall, and then these two here are unread. Fragile Lives by Professor Stephen Westerby, and Hate List by Jennifer Brown. Complete Aesop's Illustrated Fables, The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, and Magnus Chase and the Hammer of Thor, and Magnus Chase and the Ship of the Dead, both by Rick Riordan. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and Hollow City, both by Ransom Riggs. The Lightning Thief, The Sea of Monsters, The Titan's Curse, The Battle of the Labyrinth, The Last Olympian, The Lost Hero, The Son of Neptune, The Mark of Athena, The House of Hades, The Blood of Olympus, The Demigod Files, Percy Jackson and the Greek Gods, Percy Jackson and the Greek Heroes, Trials of Apollo, The Hidden Oracle, The Trials of Apollo, The Dark Prophecy, and Magnus Chase and the Sword of Summer, all by Rick Riordan. So this is the first shelf on my second bookcase, and it again is probably going to be quite difficult for me to film because it's a little bit taller than me and I'm quite short, but I basically have read books on there and it goes into my dystopia sci-fi collection, and then there's a few thrillers on the end, and as you can see I have quite a few Funko Pops. I have Falcon, Thor, Sif, Loki and Wolverine, and they are all Marvel Pops. The Queen's Poisoner by Jeff Wheeler, The Selection, The Elite, The One, The Heir, The Crown, and Happily Ever After, all by Kira Cass. The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay, all by Susan Collins. Split Second by Sophie Mackenzie. Cinder, Scarlet, Cress, Winter, Fairest, and Stars Above, all by Marissa Meyer. Salt and Stone by Victoria Scott. Slated, Fractured, Shattered, and Mind Games, all by Terry Terry. The Book of Air by Joe Treasure, a novelisation of Thor the Dark World. Eeny Meeny by MJ Arledge, The Masked Truth by Kelly Armstrong, and Stags by M.A. Bennett. On this shelf we have the rest of my thrillers, my horror books, and then the majority of my classics. And I also have my Ragnarok Pops here, so I have Loki, Thor, Heimdall, Hela and Valkyrie. And if you're wondering why the Hela one looks so weird, that is because in between filming the previous shelf and this one, she had a bit of an accident and the spring in her bobblehead broke, so I had to fix her, and now she just has a very long neck. But yeah, this is my thriller horror classic shelf. Sharp Objects and Gone Girl, both by Gillian Flynn. One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. Feel Me Fall by James Morris. Zoo by James Patterson and Michael Ledwidge. See How They Lie by Sue Warman. Suicide Notes from Beautiful Girls by Lynn Weingarten. Before We Met by Lucy Whitehouse. Mother Mother by Corinne Zalakas. The House at the End of the Street. Psycho by Robert Bloch. Say Her Name and Under My Skin by Juno Dawson. I just have these when they were printed under her dead name, so that is why they say James. Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. Heart-Shaped Box and Horns, both by Joe Hill. The Dead House and The Creeper Man, both by Dawn Kurtgich. The Cabin in the Woods by Tim Leben. The Haunting of Sunshine Girl by Paige Mackenzie. There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. Asylum by Madeline Rue. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. The Saga of Gunlaug's Serpent Tongue by Anonymous. Wailing Ghost by Pooh Songling. Caligula by Suetonius. Jason and Medea by Apollonius of Rhodes. The Tinderbox by Hans Christian Andersen. Circles of Hell by Dante. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. A Hippo Banquet by Mary Kingsley. The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell. The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. The Figure in the Carpet by Henry James. Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti. Sinbad the Sailor by Anonymous. The Life of a Stupid Man by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. The Dolphins, the Whales and the Gudgeon by Aesop. The Night is Darkening Round Me by Emily Bronte. A Pair of Silk Stockings by Kate Chopin. It Was Snowing Butterflies by Charles Darwin. The Robber Bridegroom by the Brothers Grimm. And Circe and the Cyclops by Homer. This next shelf is half historical fiction and half contemporary, and I also have Matt Murdock, Jessica Jones and Steve Rogers Funko Pops. The Fall of Icarus by Ovid. Come Close by Sappho. The Suffragettes by various authors and sources. Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. Bamboo Heart by Anne Bennett. Etiquette and Espionage and Curtsies and Conspiracies, both by Gail Carriger. Changeling, Stormbringers and Fool's Gold, all by Philippa Gregory. At the Sign of the Sugared Plum, Petals in the Ashes, The Remarkable Life and Times of Eliza Rose, At the House of the Magician, By Royal Command, The Betrayal, Fallen Grace, Velvet, and The Disgrace of Kitty Grey, all by Mary Hooper, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, Flesh Market by Nicola Morgan, The Wolf Wilder by Catherine Rundell, Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, In the Shadow of Blackbirds by Kat Winters, A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Bernard, Am I Normal Yet by Holly Bourne, No Virgin and No Shame, both by Anne Cassidy, The Shock of the Fall by Nathan Filer, Bunheads by Sophie Flack, Under Rose-Tainted Skies by Louise Gornell, Speak and Winter Girls, both by Laurie House Anderson, Paperweight by Meg Haston, Seed and Paper Butterflies, both by Lisa Heathfield, and After the Fire by Will Hill. This shelf has the fewest books on it and the most other random stuff. So in the corner here I have my jar of bookmarks and also my Fitbit charger. In the medium jar next to it there I have DS games, and here I have what was my TBR jar. It just has some badges and other miscellaneous things in it. And then my pillbox, some Vaseline and my nasal spray, just because I don't know where else to keep them. And the books on here are all contemporary, and then my A Series of Unfortunate Event books, because I had no idea what genre they were classed as, so I just kind of shoved them in the corner. Identical by Ellen Hopkins, Skinny by E.B. Kaslik, Read Me Like a Book by Liz Kessler, Everything Leads to You by Nina LaCour, The Disreputable History of Frankie Lando Banks by E. Lockhart, Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson, Solitaire by Alice Oseman, Luna by Julie Ann Peters, Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell, Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and a collector's edition of Fangirl, and If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. The Bad Beginning, The Reptile Room, The Wide Window, The Miserable Mill, The Austere Academy, The Ersatz Elevator, The Vile Village, The Hostile Hospital, The Carnivorous Carnival, The Slippery Slope, The Grim Grotto, The Penultimate Peril, and The End, all by Lemony Snicket. And then this shelf is where we start getting into my TBR or unread books properly. The first half of book until here are read, and then the rest are unread. And the read books on here are the rest of my contemporary books, and then there are 3 or 4 non-fiction memoir-y type books on there as well. And I also shove my iPad and phone chargers and stuff on there, as you can see. Greek Myths, A Wonder Book for Girls and Boys by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I am currently reading this. This Song Will Save Your Life by Layla Sales. Our Chemical Hearts by Crystal Sutherland. The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, My Favourite Manson Girl by Alison Umminger, In the Dark in the Woods by Eliza Wass, Juvie by Steve Watkins, The Art of Being Normal by Lisa Williamson, Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon, Thin by Grace Bowman, Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, Binge by Tyler Oakley, An Unquiet Mind by Kay Redfield Jameson, Sybil by Flora Rita Schreiber, Dark Tide and Sea Spell, both by Jennifer Donnelly, The Invasion of the Tearling and The Fate of the Tearling, both by Erica Johansson, The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, Hans Christian Andersen's Classic Fairy Tales, Half a War by Joe Abercrombie, The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson, and Library of Souls by Ransom Riggs. And then this very bottom shelf, please excuse the cat bowl, is just unread books and is the majority of my TBR. It is a mess and it is going to be incredibly hard to film. But The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence, 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill, The Graces by Law Eve, The Iron Queen, Iron Legends, and The Iron Traitor, all by Julie Kagawa, The Winner's Curse by Marie Rutkowski, Dracula by Bram Stoker, The Rose Society by Marie Lu, Nevernight by Jay Kristoff, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams, Ironside and Tithe by Holly Black, Missing by Kelly Armstrong, Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, The Strings of Murder by Oscar de Muriel, The Iron Knight by Julie Kagawa, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, Rune Marks by Joanne Harris, A Modern Detective by Edgar Allan Poe, Antigone by Sophocles, The Madness of Cambyses by Herodotus, The Great Fire of London by Samuel Pepys, A Very Short Introduction to Clinical Psychology by Susan Llewellyn and Katie Appiah Van Dorn, 1984 by George Orwell, And I Darken by Kirsten White, Serena by Ron Rash, American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, Bamboo Island and Bamboo Road, both by Anne Bennett, Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver, Valiant by Holly Black, Discusha, a Victorianish fairy tale by Nicholas Lovelock, The Young World by Chris Weitz, The Missing Girl by Shirley Jackson, Lance by Vladimir Nabokov, The Haunted Boy by Carson McCullers, Breakthrough by Daphne du Maurier, Carnivore by Jonathan Lyon, and Glass Sword and King's Cage, both by Victoria Avey. And now we're on to my final bookcase, which is just unread books pretty much. So this first shelf has what was a rainbow TBR but got lost, and I have a magnet from Dublin that my mum got me, a Drogon Funko Pop from Game of Thrones, and then a Black Cat. Talon by Julie Kagawa, Three Dark Crowns by Kendall Blake, The Wren Hunt by Mary Watson, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, Contagion by Terry Terry, Soldier by Julie Kagawa, I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson, Legion and Rogue, both by Julie Kagawa, Midnight Star by Marie Lu, Another Place by Matthew Crowe, Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks, Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas, and Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This next shelf is again just a TBR shelf, but it basically has my Dark Tower series and then whichever books wouldn't fit on my other bookcase, and I have a Polaroid of one of my cats there, and then 3 Children of Blood and Bone by Tony Adeyemi, The Gunslinger, The Drawing of the Three, The Wastelands, Wizard and Glass, The Wind Through the Keyhole, Wolves of the Caliph, Song of Susanna, and The Dark Tower, all by Stephen King, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, Hangman by Shirley Jackson, The Jewel by Amy Ewing, and Loki by Mike Vasek. And on this shelf I just have all of my Walking Dead stuff, so I have all of my graphic novels and then the actual books for it. And I also have Herschel, Michonne, Glenn, Jesus and Daryl Pop. The Rise of the Governor, The Road to Woodbury, The Fall of the Governor Part 1, The Fall of the Governor Part 2, Descent, Invasion, Search and Destroy, and Return to Woodbury, all by Jay Bonanzinger. Volume 1, Days Gone By, Volume 2, Miles Behind Us, Volume 3, Safety Behind Bars, Volume 4, The Heart's Desire, Volume 5, The Best Defence, Volume 6, This Sorrowful Life, Volume 7, The Calm Before, Volume 8, Made to Suffer, Volume 9, Here We Remain, Volume 10, What We Become, Volume 11, Fear the Hunters, Volume 12, Life Among Them, Volume 13, Too Far Gone, Volume 14, No Way Out, Volume 15, We Find Ourselves, Volume 16, A Larger World, Volume 17, Something to Fear, Volume 18, What Comes After, Volume 19, March to War, Volume 20, All Out War Part 1, Volume 21, All Out War Part 2, Volume 22, A New Beginning, Volume 23, Whispers into Screams, Volume 24, Life and Death, Volume 25, No Turning Back, Volume 26, Call to Arms, Volume 27, The Whisperer War, and Volume 28, A Certain Doom. This shelf has all my Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire stuff on it, and it just has Khal Drogo and Daenerys pops. You have the illustrated version of A Game of Thrones, The Wit and Wisdom of Tyrion Lannister, A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords Part 1, Steel and Snow, A Storm of Swords Part 2, Blood and Gold, A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons Part 1, Dreams and Dust, A Dance with Dragons Part 2, After the Feast, The Ice Dragon, and The World of Ice and Fire, all by George R.R. Martin. And then we have Inside HBO's Game of Thrones and Inside HBO's Game of Thrones Seasons 3 and 4. And then these last two shelves on this bookcase don't really have reading books on them, they just have my large books that don't have anywhere else to go. So I won't be going through them, but as you can see I have all of my Guinness World Record books, a few Marvel books, and then the Pop-Up Guide to Westeros. And then finally, and again very difficult to film, we have my graphic novels. The majority of these are read, but there are about 4 that I have not read, but yeah. Savage Wolverine, Kill Island, Thor, God of Thunder, The Accursed, Thor, God of Thunder, The Last Days of Midgard, Thor for Asgard, Thor, Goddess of Thunder, Thor the Dark World Prelude, Thor, Wolves of the North, Loki, Agent of Asgard, Trust Me, Ms. Marvel, No Normal, Journey into Mystery featuring Sif, Stronger Than Monsters, Fearless Defenders, Doom Maidens, Uncanny X-Force, Let It Bleed, X-Men Origins, Gambit, Rat Queens, Sass and Sorcery, Morning Glories, Volume 1, They're Not Like Us, Volume 1, Outcast, A Darkness Surrounds Him, Bedlam, Volume 1, The Wicked and the Divine, The Forced Act, Wolf, Blood and Magic, Monstrous, Awakening, Snot Girl, Green Hair Don't Care, Deadly Class, Reagan Youth, Lumberjanes, Beware the Kitten Holy, Monstrous, The Blood, The Wicked and the Divine, Fandemonium, Jessica Jones, Uncaged, Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, Nimona by Noelle Stevenson, and New X-Men Volume 1. So that was my bookshelf tour. It took forever, and I don't think I'll be doing another one of these for a while, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I personally like to see what books other people have. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, again, please let me know, and I will see you soon in the new video. Bye! I also just found 2 hair bubbles taking all those books off the shelf, so there's that.